Hey guys, hope you're doing well and thanks for watching today's video where we're going to talk about the idea behind congruence. So congruence is probably something you've heard of before, maybe it's something you don't completely understand, or maybe it's something that you knew a long time ago and you just want a refresher. We're going to kind of just explain what it is, what it means, and why it's important. So congruence is to shapes as equal to is to numbers. So that means if I have an equation like 5x equals 5, I'm saying x is equal to 1. They're the same thing. If I have a 1 and I have an x, they are equivalent. And congruent figures is similar, but it's with shapes. So it means that they have the exact same size and shape. So that means like this triangle would be equal to this triangle here. But the congruent symbol, we'll talk about that in a minute. You don't put an equal sign, you put this congruent symbol. We just add this little tilde on the top of the equal sign. So what congruent means is that you can turn, flip, slide one figure so that it'll fit exactly onto another. So they have the exact same shape and size. So this means that they have what's important is that this triangle can be congruent to a triangle that looks like this. These aren't congruent because I didn't draw them perfectly, but you get the point. Is that I could rotate and then slide it over and it would cover it exactly. Those can still be congruent. It doesn't need to be in the same orientation. That's what it means when you can turn, flip, and slide. So they don't have to be right next to each other. You can move them around. Okay. So now the areas and the perimeters must be equal. That makes sense. If they're going to slide on each other and be the exact same, they have to have equal area and perimeter. The corresponding angles of congruent shapes are equal in measure, and the corresponding line segments are equal in length. So that's right here, the corresponding sides and angles. Corresponding sides and angles are sides and angles that match up on the congruent figures. So let's think about this one. That would be this one and this one. Could be this one and this one. Those are the corresponding angles, and we're saying they're equivalent. And corresponding sides would be that and that and that and that, the right-hand side, and then lastly the bottom. So we're saying those all have to be congruent. And that's really important. That's something we're going to get into in a minute here. But this is also important. The order of letters in the names of congruent shapes displays the corresponding relationships. This sounds really weird, but we're about to go through an example and it's going to make sense in a minute. But this is really important and something a lot of people can overlook, and it's something that teachers often like to trick students with. So make sure you realize that the order of letters in the name of the congruent shapes display the corresponding relationships. And what that means is right here. Let's talk about this one. So we have two rectangles and we're given that they are congruent. That's this symbol right here again. Rectangle ABCD is congruent to rectangle EFGH. So ABCD right here, EFGH right here. And now let's think about what we just said. We said the order of letters in the names of congruent shapes represent the corresponding relationships, and we know that the angles are congruent and the sides are congruent. So let's write down the sides and get our congruent relationships. So we know we have side length AB, and we give our side length with that little bar on the top, and then we're going to say it's congruent. Well, what side is it congruent to? This is the part about the letters matching up. AB corresponds with EF, because those are the first two letters. So that must be that side. So AB is congruent to EF. Okay, so now let's do the second segment, which is BC is going to be congruent. Well, these are the middle two letters of the names. It's going to be congruent to FG. And now you put these little bars, I guess we could call them, on the shapes, and that kind of shows that they're the same length. So AB is congruent to, so BC is congruent to FG. Alright, so next one, just following the same pattern. So now CD. Now we're going to be doing the last two letters. What are the last two letters of the other one? Well, it's GH. So those are congruent. Should be a straight line there. So now I'm going to do 3. Then lastly, I have the A to D. So now the ones that connect the entire shape, AD, well, that must be congruent to the first letter and the last letter, so EH, I mean. So now lastly, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so now those are the sides, and now we need to think about the angles. So we have angle. Well, this is the first one, this is the second. For a rectangle, it's a little easier because they're all 90 degrees, but we're going to write out the relationships like it's any shape, not necessarily a rectangle. So angle, how do we name this angle? Let's be careful. It's going to be DAB. So angle DAB is congruent to, well, so now we're doing the corresponding angles. So these are the corresponding sides. Now we're doing corresponding angles. So angle DAB, well, I started the last letter, then went to the first and the third, so it's going to be HEF. Went to the first and the second, I should say. So HEF. Okay, so next angle, I'm going to do this one here. That's going to be angle ABC. That one's easy, pretty straightforward. It's the first three letters of the shape, so it's going to be angle EFH. Okay, so now angle, let's do BCD, is going to be congruent to angle BCD is FGH. So now we're second, third, and fourth letter, FGH. We're the last three in each shape, and so that's that one. And now we have the last one is going to be BCD. Wait, no, we did BCD, so our last one is going to be, which one did we not do? We did ABC, we did BCD. Oh yeah, we haven't done CDA, angle CDA. Okay, and that one is congruent too. So we started with the last two, so it's going to be GH, and then we went back to the first one, so it's going to be GHE. So angle GHE. And so now this is the relationships that we have. And this is something that we're going to have to use a lot in our proof. So it's really important that you have this idea of corresponding sides or corresponding parts of congruent triangles, and really any shape like this one, a rectangle, are congruent. So now we have parallelogram ABCD is congruent to parallelogram EFGH. So what we're saying here is that, well, again, we need to label all our parts. So we're going to do the sides and the angles again. I recommend you pause the video and try to do this on your own, see if you get the same answers as me. So sides, I'm going to mark them on my shape first. So AB is congruent to EF, okay? Then so on and so forth. BC is congruent to FG. GH must be congruent to CD. And lastly, 1, 2, 3, 4, AD congruent to EH. Alright, so I'm just going to write those down really quick. So AB is congruent to EF. Then we have BC is congruent to FG. We've got CD congruent to GH. Then we've got AD, or you can say DA, either one, doesn't matter, is congruent to EH. Okay, so again, really quickly how I did that is I looked at the letters. I know the letters have to match up, so if I go AB, I must use the first two letters of EF. So I must use the EF. And then lastly, if I do AD, I use the first one and then the last one, so I need to use EH. What if I had written, well, segment DA? You got to be careful here, because even though it is the same segment length as EH, you would want to say HE. So you got to keep the order the same. So DA is the last letter than the first, so it needs to be the last letter in the first of the other shape as well. So that's just a good rule of thumb. Alright, so now angles, let's mark those. So angle DAB, and you can mark those with a little mark as well. So DAB is going to have to be the same as HEF. So HEF is this one. And then I'll do one more, and then we'll just write them all down. So EFG, that's this angle here, has to be congruent to EFG, must be congruent to ABC. So ABC right here. So I'm going to draw two marks there. So now let's do my angles. So just write them all out. Alright, so let's do DAB first. Is congruent to, like we said, angle HEF. Then I did angle ABC. Is congruent to angle EFG. Then we have angle BCD, which is the last three letters, so it must be congruent to angle FGH. Then our last angle that we have is angle CDA, not DCA, CDA. So angle CDA must be congruent to angle GHE. So these are the important things that you can get once you know that two triangles are congruent, or two shapes, in this case parallelograms, are congruent. You can write with confidence, and this helps you do proofs. You can write, well, the sides are congruent and the angles are congruent, and it's really important to be able to notice which sides and which angles are corresponding. That's the idea right here. Corresponding sides and angles are angles that match up on the congruent figures. and the order of letters is really important too. So we're going to get into a lot more with congruence, but here I just wanted to give you the idea, what it means, and the important properties associated with congruence. So thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions.